Yo, what is up guys, Grim here, and in today's video we are going to be min-maxing the new Vastir Atlas Ascendancy tree for the league start. So with the drop of all the new Ascendancy Atlas trees, we are going to be min-maxing each and every one of them, and new Vastir is first on the chopping block. We're going to be doing it for a profitability point of view. We're going to run through all the nodes, talk about how they work, the profitability of them, and which ones you're going to want to be taking for certain different playstyles and making the most currency. So without further ado, let's get into it. So we have here that we have the new Vastir talent tree, but we'll also be referring to a handy dandy spreadsheet for reference. It's a little bit easier to kind of get a holistic view of what's going on in a spreadsheet. So for new Vastir, which leagues are present on the Ascendance tree? Well, we have Legion, Delve, Abyss, and Anarchy to choose from, and we have a total of 5 notables that we can select. So a notable is of course a big circle, and we need to take 1 travel point to get to a notable each time. So each notable costs 2 points. Every time you complete a Maven encounter, you will get 2 points and you can spec into a new notable. So these notables are incredibly powerful on these Ascendancies trees. So the first one here we're going to tackle is the Delve League. We're going to tackle this one first because it's a bit of an alternative playstyle, and you'll notice that a lot with these Ascendancy trees. There'll be split paths that you can go down depending on which playstyle you enjoy. Generally, there's a lot of master kind of gameplay stuff with stuff like Nico, Alva, June, and stuff like that. And there's a lot of kind of juicing up Legion, Abyss, and all sorts of things like that. We're going to get into all of them, and we're going to talk about how profitable each and every one of them will be. Of course, if you don't like a certain activity, you can always go to a different Ascendancy tree, or you can go to different kind of points on the tree. So let's get into it. First node we're going to get into here is Mad Devotion for Delve. So this one here gives you additional favor, which is just used to buy hideout decorations, so that's not too useful, but you do also have a 10% chance to gain an additional Nico mission. So there is a little bit of word funniness here, but the way it reads for a lot of people, and what I would imagine it's going to end up being, is that you get an additional 10% chance on your existing 10% chance to gain a Nico mission when you complete a map. So that'll essentially double your chance to gain a Nico mission. In addition to that, small nodes for master-based leagues, for example Delve, give an additional 3% chance to gain a mission as well, bringing you up to a grand total of 29% chance to encounter a Nico mission upon completing a map, if it works the way we think it does, if you took all the nodes here. So Mad Devotion is absolutely a very good node to take if you're looking to do Delve on a budget and you don't want to go and invest in Sulfite Scarabs. If you're already juicing up with Sulfite Scarabs, this node isn't too good for you. However, it is a travel node to get to the other nodes, so it isn't too bad either. So into the next one. Out of the blue. So sulfite veins and chests and areas have 5% chance to also contain an equal amount of azurite. So the main application for this is going to be collecting sulfite piles in maps, whether you need to use them for delving or not, and you will get a surplus of azurite from that, and you can use that azurite to buy resonators, 1 socket, 2 socket, whatever kind of resonators are most profitable, and you can sell those to other players. So it is in fact a pure currency gain by taking this node, as when you kind of encounter sulfite piles. Resonators in general aren't too common from most league mechanics. They don't drop in bulk, so buying them in bulk with azurite is actually the primary way of obtaining them and selling them to other players. So you can probably make quite a little bit of currency off of this one, depending on how much sulfite you can get in your piles and how many Nico missions you end up with. So not too bad there. Next up, we got sulfite veins and chests and areas are guarded by sulfite hoarding monsters. So this is a bit of an interesting one. It would be really good if you had sulfite nodes in every map. However, that isn't the case. Sulfite isn't guaranteed. So these monsters can't be treated as just additional packs like a sextant. However, they can be treated as sulfite juice. We don't know how much sulfite these mobs will award, but they will award an amount, potentially making it a very good node if you're trying to gather sulfite quickly to go delving. So pretty cool there in overall. So what are we looking at for Delve? We're looking at more sulfite from sulfite sentinels. We're looking at higher chances of getting Nico missions overall by a considerable amount, almost triple the amount of Nico missions if it works as intended or as it reads. And then out of the blue, you're going to get a bit of extra azurite to buy some resonators with to get a bit of extra chaos, which isn't too bad indeed. So overall, kind of mid-tier in terms of the craziness. There's absolutely better nodes out there, but if you're delving and you're looking for a bit of extra soul fight, it could be worth investing into. If you're not looking to invest in delving and you don't really enjoy that mechanic, absolutely steer clear from it, as there's better options on this Ascendancy tree. Next up, let's get into Legion. So first up, high value targets. So high value targets adds 3 additional sergeants, which are rare monsters only. All rare monsters in Legions are considered sergeants. Generally, there's about 12 to 20 mobs in a fully fledged Legion in a high tier map that are rare and sergeants. And that is tested by essentially when you blow up a Legion. If you assume that all rare monsters are sergeants, you can just check how many headhunter buffs you get when you blow up the Legion. And in my testing, it's anywhere between like 15 to 20-ish in a full Legion. And this is going to add an additional 3 sergeants, so you'll get an additional 3 monsters, which are rare, for your looting purposes and juice purposes. Sergeants also have a higher chance at dropping splinters, so you're going to net an additional few splinters per Legion as well. Now the real kicker for this node is that Legion sergeants in areas always have rewards. So remember how I was saying that there's about 15 to 20 rares. For the average player, maybe it's a little bit lower depending on the layout you're doing. If it's not perfect, you may be expecting like 10 rares, somewhere around that ballpark, 10 to 20 depending. Obviously variance is massive, tier is massive, RNG is massive. You're going to be able to turn all of those rare monsters into sergeants that have rewards. Generally, only about like a quarter to a third of them have rewards with my anecdotal evidence. But now with this notable, you're going to give them all rewards, meaning you're going to get a ton more incubators, like maps, all sorts of things, currency nodes. The rewards are the things that they have on their head, the icons, things that drop from warhordes, etc. So this is actually a completely insane node if you're doing Legions at all in New Vastir. You're going to get considerable more Legion rewards on your Legions, especially if you're doing them regularly. So absolutely crazy, and it really does encourage you to break out that full Legion and get maximum rewards from that juice. So very, very, very good node indeed. So next up, war supplies. Each Legion in areas contains an additional war horde. So this actually isn't that powerful. On average, a war horde drops anywhere between 4 to 6 splinters regularly from a high tier Legion. And generally they have 1 Legion reward. So remember how we were talking about Legion rewards on high value targets before? You're going to get tons more on those sergeants, but on war supplies, you're only getting 1 war chest and you're only getting about 4 to 6 splinters. So it's not that powerful. To compare it with something present in the game, a polished Legion Scarab's kind of bonus is to add 2 additional warhordes to the Legion. And that's the bonus for it being polished versus rusted. So that's kind of like when you upgrade from rusted to polished, that's the effect you get. So it's about half as good as the polished bonus, which is actually really not that powerful. However, it is a travel node to an extremely powerful node, Emblematic, over here. So Emblematic reads, timeless splinters dropped by Legion monsters, that is critical information, in areas have 1% chance to drop a timeless emblem instead. So when you're doing these Legions, I would say probably about 80% of the splinters, based on my few hundred Legion Scarab tests with data that I've collected, 80% of the splinters that drop are from monsters, with about 50% of them coming from generals. Using my gilded Legion Scarab test here as an anecdote. So the real question here is, do generals count as monsters? Because you have to remember, generals drop around 8 to 10 splinters, and if those count, that's a 10% chance for generals to drop an emblem, like a full emblem, which is completely insane. Now, if that is the case, this node is completely crazy. It's about 80% more splinters overall, because every splinter that drops has a chance to turn into 100, which is completely insane indeed. So a very, very powerful node. Now you have to remember that you can't get them from warhordes because those aren't monsters, and the question is, can you convert to emblems from generals? That is the real big sticking point, which will dictate whether Emblematic is very, very powerful or just okay. If generals don't work, this is probably not going to be too powerful. It's going to end up about 40% more splinters versus like the 80, but definitely very, very powerful node if it does work with those generals. So very, very cool indeed. Worth noting, the small Legion nodes here give 1% chance for an additional Legion Splinter to drop from monsters that do drop them, which is, you know, very, very minor bonus here, but Legion really doesn't need any help in the power department when you consider the notables that we have available to us here. So very, very good. Let's move on to Abyss. So, Abyssal Army. Abyss monsters in areas grant 50% increased XP. For you XP junkies, that's going to be really good. But the kicker here is Abysses in areas spawn 100% more monsters. So this is basically a straight up 100% more multiplier on Abysses. So when you pop one Abyss, you're going to get double the amount of monsters straight up. So traditionally, Abysses aren't very popular with players. So much so that people completely skip them even when they spawn naturally in their map. So the question is, would you do an Abyss if it was twice as good, twice as many monsters? Keep in mind that Abysses offer a ton of rare monsters, and they do offer, with this node, quite a significant amount of pack size as well. So if you're doing something like a Delirium Mirror, or, you know, Delirium Orbs, you can expect to get quite a lot of Delirium kind of like tile reward juice from this node. So very, very powerful indeed, literally doubling the efficacy of Abyss node here, and also giving you a bit of XP if you're into that kind of thing. So it's going to really come down to your playstyle. Do you like babysitting Abysses? Are you okay with it? Do you enjoy the Abyss mechanic? If yes, this is an insane node, straight up doubling your efficiency on the amount of loot and mobs you're getting. Very, very powerful indeed. Let's move on to Votive Horde. So, Abyss Troves in areas have 10% chance to drop a rare item with an Abyssal Socket. So this one's completely up in the air. Generally, you would assume that this has the identical effect to the current Hollow Fossil. Hollow Fossils are usable on stuff like helmets, chest pieces, gloves, boots, and I think that's about it. You're using them on main body piece armors, and you're able to put one Abyssal Socket on them, and it counts as an affix. So when it specifies that it's a rare item, that definitely lends itself to being very similar to the Hollow Fossil mechanic, and that would unfortunately not be too powerful. The reason for this is it's very difficult to sell items like this or roll a good one in the first place. Abyssal Sockets definitely lends itself more to harvest crafting and creating the perfect item versus kind of picking up an item off the floor. It's kind of like picking up a talisman with a random anoint. So with that tackled, let's move on to the second possibility. If this allows Abyssal Sockets on alternative pieces of gear, for example a leather belt as an affix, or a ring, this is completely insane. However, I don't see grinding gear doing something like this, even though we have seen it a little bit in the past with stuff like heist belts. We did see that drop in those chests there. It is possible, but I highly doubt it, and if it functions like the Hollow Fossil, I don't think it's that powerful. Next up, +3 to level of Abyssal Troves in areas. So the main application of this is to allow you to get to high tier Abyss Jewels faster. So if you guys didn't know, if you have item level 80 or 83 Abyss Jewels and you have them in bulk, people, specifically crafters, want to buy these for a reasonable price, like 2 chaos each, maybe 1 chaos a little bit later, maybe a little bit more at the start, so that they can bulk craft them and sell them to other players. So this is going to allow you to get to those breakpoints of 80 and 83 earlier and in lower tier maps. So it actually could be a fairly good league start option to get some currency early and sell to those crafters as they come online pretty quick. Next up, the last part of Votive Horde here is Abyssal Troves in areas have 200% increased item quantity, which is pretty good if it applies to Abyss Jewels like we were talking about earlier. It's going to allow you to pump them more often and get more of them. My opinion is that this probably will apply to the Abyss Jewel drop rate. However, I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't. So yeah, definitely very interesting there. Abyss has some early game potential. I wouldn't be picking up Votive Horde late game after the fall off of those bases, but Abyssal Army definitely does have some merit if you're willing to do the Abyss monster you know, babysitting with the crack. Next up, let's move on to a bit of a black horse here. Total Anarchy. This is the Anarchy League we're talking about now. Areas contain an additional rogue exile for every 2 additional content types applied to areas. So a content type is essentially a league, or you know, in general, it's kind of like anything which appears on the side of the map. So Beyond, Delve, you know, Harbinger, you know, Anarchy itself, Legion, etc. So every 2 of them you put on, you know, you can gain an additional rogue exile. Now this isn't, in my opinion, that powerful. because you can get 4 out of Scarabs if you have the 5 slot map device. And you can get a few more with Sextants, and you can get some naturally, and maybe you get a few from your Ascendancies as well, and you get your Master Mission on top of that. So it's not that crazy. I can't see getting more than about 3 or 4 exiles from this, so definitely not too powerful there, but it is what it is. It's a travel node. Next up, you have wild rogue exiles in areas have 15% chance to have rewards, with a bit of specific detail here provided, that wild exiles are rogue exiles that are spawned randomly within the area. So you cannot do something like a strongbox, you can't use something like a prophecy. Now I will assume here that stuff like Azana modifier, the total anarchy node, and other stuff like that will work. They just don't want you using the infinite strongbox loop that you have with the scout and the warband and all stuff like that. You can kind of create a really weird loop with monstrous treasure and get like 50 exiles in a map. They don't want that. So that's why that line is there. But 15% chance to have rewards. What is rewards? The way I'm interpreting this is essentially a reward, kind of league reward. Think of Legion, think of Blight. When you open those chests, you get a few Abyssal Splinters, or it's not Abyssal Splinters, some Breach Splinters, or Simulacrum Splinters, or maybe a Delirium Orb or something like that. That's how I'm interpreting that. Now, 15% chance is actually quite low, unfortunately. Especially because you're not getting that many exiles from Eternal Anarchy, and you're probably going to have to roll this using the Zana map device. You're giving up the opportunity for something like a Legion. So I don't think these are too powerful, but that'll all rely on what rewards is. If rewards is heavily overtuned, it's going to be very powerful. So what my strategy will be with this Atlas tree personally, and my progression will be to do the following. The first node I'm going to take is in fact high value targets. It's just too powerful to give up. Even if you're playing a non-clear speed build, one that just is like a mania build, you're going to get significantly more opportunities to break out high reward targets, which give currency maps or something like that, than you would otherwise. It also gives you more rares, which have a chance to drop splinters. I think this is overall the best node on the tree. Next up, you could choose to spec into Abyssal Army and Votive Horde for your second and third points, or you could choose to invest in this early to try and get those early Abyss jewels to kind of get a kickstart on the economy. Let me move my camera back over here if you want. So I'd either go up here first, or I would go Abyssal Army, Votive Horde for what we just mentioned there. Now, for your fourth and fifth point, this is going to be fairly late into the league. Well, not fairly late into progression of the Atlas, I'll say. So this is when you're doing the 7th encounter with 7 bosses and the 10th with the Maven. So this is quite, more intense content, and I don't expect many people to have this very, very early on. This is Awaken at 8 kind of territory here now that we're getting into, maybe a bit before if you focus on this region specifically. So War Supplies would be my next choice, and then following that up with Emblematic, because you're starting to get into the point where you could theoretically have a build which could break out a full Legion. You can start getting full benefit out of that Emblematic node here. You can start investing in Gilded Scarabs if you want to try and get those generals in there. If it works, then you're getting a ton of emblems to sell to other players. Very, very powerful indeed. Now, if you want to kind of experiment and really push the boat out, you could, in theory, go down and try and take Total Anarchy and Rogue Trader instead of the Abyssal stuff, but that is definitely a risk, and just on paper, it doesn't look that powerful. So in summary, you can either take high value targets first, or you can go the Abyssal route first for those nice juicy Abyss Jewel kind of sales, and then you can follow that up with War Supplies and high value War Supplies, and then Emblematic to kind of round it off. And those are the nodes I personally would take if you're not looking to delve for the maximum amount of currency in New Vastir. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this video. Let me know with a bit of feedback if you like this kind of style. Plenty more to come, and make sure you tune into the other areas, because this, in my opinion, is a fairly low power level area. There's plenty more to come which are far more powerful. So until then, cheers.